Hello and welcome back to Irradiance. We are in the editor today and we're just taking a look at some small coding stuff I've done in the background. It's not stuff you're going to see, or not you're going to see it but you're not going to notice it too much. So we're in the profile screen this time and we have the gunner and the engineer. And now in towers we have two different towers we can select from. So every gunner has to have a cannon and a rocket tower. But they have a choice of two more. And here's the list. And this is the list specific to the gunner. Because they already have a cannon and a rocket, this list of towers does not include a cannon or a rocket. This second drop down will be a bit buggy for the second time around we do this, but don't worry, I know what the fix is. But yeah, so these lists are kind of what they are. And on the right hand side we have a couple of saved preferences for the gunner. So we have gunner tower 3 is currently slow and gunner tower 4 is flamer. So if I select sniper, we see that changes to sniper. But flame and slow is fine for me right now. And we can see flamer, slow. I save and exit. I switch to the engineer. Go to tower. We can see the two default towers are now flamer and slow. So that every engineer will have a flame tower and a slow floor. And we can see this list has changed. So we see now we don't include the flame or the slow towers on this list because the engineer already has it. So you don't need to make that change. As you can see, this still shows some of the old information. It's just we're not resetting the values in the drop down. However, the drop down does work with the correct value. So if I was to select, so as we can see right now, engineer tower 4 is cannon, and if we look on this list, the fourth selection is cannon. So you can see this is actually working right now. So let's say we want a cannon, and there we go, engineer tower 3 is cannon, and I believe this will select a rocket for us. Yes, and it does. So cannon and rocket. So let's save and exit. And let's just make a quick note down of what both classes should have. So a gunner should have a flame, a slow, a cannon, and a rocket. In that order, and a wall at the start. And an energy. I'm just writing this down on my little notepad just so I know for testing sake this is going to turn out correct. So the NG should have a wall, and tower 3 always pops it first. So NG's tower 3 is a cannon, and then a rocket, and then a flame, and then a slow. So when we're loading the towers into the game, we actually load them in a slightly different order to what you see on screen here. We'd load this tower in first, then we load in this tower, then we load in this tower, and then we load in this tower, and then we actually put the wall, we load the wall block in before all that. It's because these things are kind of unknowns, and when I was testing them, it was much easier to work with when I loaded those in first. Because they would break much quicker. So sometimes, if I had it the other way around at the end of the loading schedule, you wouldn't necessarily know what was wrong until you kind of cycle through all the towers. But now, because I have them at the top and they load first, they tend to break quicker, and I get a quicker feedback on what's causing the issue. So if we go into our game and go play, we now have characters, and the gunner and the engineer, and these are two distinct characters now. They have their saves in terms of loadouts completely separate. And if we go to the gunner, we will see we're expecting a wall, a flame, a slow, a cannon, and then a rocket. So we have a wall, a flame, a slow, a cannon, and a rocket. So we get kind of what we're expecting. And then if we switch to the engineer and we see engineer selected, I'm expecting a wall, a cannon, a rocket, a flame, and then a slow. So wall, cannon, rocket, flame, slow. So that says to me that everything's loading correctly, it's loading in the correct order, and our loadout screen is now working correctly. So what we did there was we added more checks in the background to allow the drop-down list to not add towers that that character already has by default. So a gunner will always have a cannon tower by default, so we should never, there's no reason to ever add a cannon into that drop-down menu because it will just create duplicates, and I don't have duplicate checking in at this time. So there's a couple of ways we could do the duplicate checking. We could, check if when the character person selects the name, because taking a step back a bit, duplicates still could happen in theory if a player takes both drop downs and selects the same option. So say on an engineer they don't have a cannon, but they select for both drop down menus cannon. The game should in theory still work fine. They will just have they'll just have a duplicate cannon at that point. They'll just have two sets of cannons, and they'll have wasted a choice. So there's a couple of things we could do. We could essentially implement a dupe check on whenever a player selects something from the drop down. If we select it and if we detect there's a dupe, we could put a warning up to the player suggesting they select something else, and perhaps hide the save button whenever we detect a dupe. We could, whenever we select a tower from one drop-down list, we make sure that item's then removed from the other drop-down list. That might be the cleaner way to do it, but it might be a bit more complex to implement. So yeah, there's a few ways we could do this. I probably will do it the cleaner way, even if it is a little bit more complex, because I think on the end user, it will make things easier for them. And in my short experience of working on Irradiance, anytime you can make the UI easier and more intuitive so the player doesn't have to think about what they're doing, less issues occur. And that's something I learned when we did the original iteration of the tower building UI. When the players started having to click and start having to do stuff, and when it wasn't implicitly explained what they had to do, it was actually very confusing. So once we now got to the point where our tower building and upgrading is much simpler, and all just kind of pops up, and you don't have to push, like you don't have to click on different things. We don't interfere with the mouse too much. It's just a key push or a button push. It makes things much more intuitive and allows players just to kind of play the game without having to worry about systems and trying to figure out what they have to do to get from A to B. And that's the same philosophy we should approach everything with. The easier we can make the game in terms of usability, the easier it's going to be for the player just to get to the fun stuff, the game that they want to enjoy. So yeah, that's probably the approach we're going to take with the drop down menus, and I will figure out a way to do it. I've got a couple of ideas of how we're going to do it. Yeah, because we don't want the players to have dupes. So that's kind of what we've been doing in the background, and yeah. Character selection is now a thing. Tower selection has evolved. And I'm just kind of pushing for this first playable demo at this point where we can hand it off to people that want to give it a go. Because I think we're quite close now. In terms of my notes, I want to add another melee weapon. I want to add another gun. I want to add one, maybe two more towers to the selection that actually work. And then just kind of polish everything and work from there. So yeah, that's where we're at with Irradiance. Catch you next time.